You just finished a whole page and remember absolutely nothing from it. Your eyes reached the last sentence, but your mind never arrived there. So you quietly scroll back, hoping the second time will somehow be different. You read every word again, yet the meaning slips away just as quickly. Soon you start wondering if your memory is quietly falling apart. It feels impossible that so much reading leaves behind so little memory. But this happens to far more men than most people ever realize. The surprising reason has far less to do with intelligence than you think. Your brain may have been working incredibly hard, just not on the page. Once you understand why this happens, you will never judge yourself the same way again. When you begin reading, your brain is already managing far more words in front of you. It tracks meaning, predicts the next sentence, and filters out countless distractions at once. At the very same time, it keeps unfinished thoughts quietly running beneath your awareness. That hidden mental activity steals attention long before you ever notice it happening. Your eyes continue moving because reading has become almost automatic over the years. But automatic reading is not the same thing as genuine understanding or memory. The words enter your eyes while the meaning never fully reaches your attention. Psychologists call this an attentional lapse, and nearly everyone experiences it sometimes. For some men, though, this pattern happens so often it starts feeling permanent. The strange part is they usually believe the problem is their memory instead. In reality, memory cannot store information that attention never truly received. Your brain is not refusing to remember because it was never fully present. Imagine trying to save a file that was never completely downloaded in the first place. That is much closer to what happens every time an entire page simply disappears. And the reason your attention keeps drifting is even more revealing than you might expect. One reason this happens is that your brain was never designed to hold every single thought equally. Instead, it constantly searches for what feels urgent, meaningful, or emotionally important. A paragraph about history cannot compete with a problem your mind believes must be solved today. Without realizing it, your attention quietly leaves the page and follows that unfinished problem. Psychologists call this mind wandering, and it happens far more often than most people imagine. Research shows the brain naturally drifts whenever the present feels less important than inner thoughts. That is why you can finish an entire chapter while remembering almost none of it afterward. The words were processed just enough to keep your eyes moving across each sentence. But they were never processed deeply enough to become lasting memories inside your mind. Think about driving home without remembering the journey, even though you arrived safely. Reading can work exactly the same way when attention quietly slips somewhere else. The page is real, but your conscious mind has already started another conversation. The frustrating part is that this often feels like proof you are becoming less intelligent. But what it actually reveals is something far more human and surprisingly common. And for many men, the deeper reason has nothing to do with reading itself. Many men who reread the same paragraph are carrying invisible conversations inside their minds all day. Part of their attention is already planning, solving, fixing, or preparing for what comes next. Bills, deadlines, family work, and responsibilities quietly compete for every piece of mental space. Even during quiet moments, the brain keeps searching for problems that still need solving. That constant mental scanning leaves very little attention available for the page itself. Your eyes keep reading while another part of your mind keeps running tomorrow's simulation. It is not laziness, and it is rarely a lack of discipline or effort. It is often a brain that has forgotten how to completely relax its guard. Psychologists know that chronic stress narrows attention towards survival and immediate concerns. Learning becomes harder because the brain gives priority to what feels urgent instead. It is difficult to absorb new ideas while carrying the weight of unfinished worries. That is why peaceful vacations often make reading suddenly feel easier again. The environment changes, but more importantly, your internal pressure finally begins to soften. The page did not become more interesting because your mind became more available. And once you see this pattern, the guilt begins losing its grip. The truth is, your memory was never built to keep everything that passes before your eyes. It constantly decides what deserves space and what can quietly disappear without consequence. Emotion, meaning surprise and relevance, almost always win that silent competition. Plain information without connection is often pushed aside before it can settle. That is why one powerful conversation stays with you, while 3 pages quickly vanish. Memory is less like a bookshelf and more like a spotlight moving through the dark. It shines brightly on what feels important and leaves everything else barely noticed. When your mind is already crowded, the spotlight becomes even narrower than before. The words are still there, but they never receive enough attention to truly stay. This is why rereading sometimes works, because the second pass meets a calmer mind. The information finally finds enough space to connect with what you already know. Understanding grows when attention slows, instead of rushing toward the next thought. Your brain remembers connections far better than isolated facts floating on their own. Once those connections appear, the page suddenly feels easier to recall later. That realization completely changes what forgetting actually says about your mind. This does not mean you are bad at learning or incapable of understanding difficult ideas. It may simply mean your attention has been carrying more weight than anyone could easily see. Many men who forget what they read are remarkably deep and reflective thinkers. Their minds naturally connect ideas instead of storing isolated pieces of information. That strength can also make attention wander toward bigger questions and unfinished thoughts. The goal is not to force your brain into perfect focus every single time. The goal is to give your mind enough quiet to actually receive what it reads. Even a short pause after each paragraph helps the meaning settle more deeply. Summarizing one idea before moving on also strengthens memory in powerful ways. Reading fewer pages with full attention beats rushing through an entire chapter. Real learning happens when understanding becomes stronger than the urge to keep moving. Your brain needs moments of stillness just as much as it needs information. Once you stop fighting the way your mind naturally works, everything becomes easier. You begin working with your brain instead of constantly feeling defeated by it. That shift alone changes the way many people experience reading forever. The next time a page disappears from your memory, do not mistake it for failure. Remember that attention always comes before memory, and without one, the other cannot exist. Your mind was never empty because it was already carrying more than you realized. That does not make you less intelligent, and it certainly does not make you broken. Sometimes, the strongest minds simply struggle to become quiet long enough to absorb. Understanding this can replace years of frustration with a little more patience and clarity. The way your brain learns may be different, but different does not mean worse. Once you stop blaming yourself, reading can become enjoyable again instead of exhausting. Subscribe for more psychology videos that explain the hidden patterns behind everyday behavior. You may understand your own mind far better than you ever thought possible.